Tonight with Lisa Grant.
Welcome back, and waiting on the phone for me from London, I have Jonathan Davis. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Lisa.
Hello. You're enjoying the sunshine, aren't you?
Well, yes, your colleague Steve's over here right now.
I know.
Got the sun with him. Thank you very much. Can you tell him not to go back and just keep the sun here, please? We don't get much of it. As you know.
It's a very warm end to September. It absolutely is. Listen, let's jump straight in. I'm a bit confused, if I'm honest. I thought everyone in Germany stood up and said, we don't want this and we're sick of the bailouts. And I thought there was some kind of referendum, maybe I'm wrong, and I thought all the people said no. So how come today Germany has said yes?
Yes, there have been referenda
That's what I thought.
in Germany, and over 60% of the German people want no further part in bailing out southern Mediterranean countries.
Right.
However, what the people want can often be different to what the incumbent government wants. And although we, over the last 18 months, whenever there's been a bailout pending, we've heard all the senior politicians saying, no, it's not going to happen, we're not going to vote for it. And then, of course, that's exactly what they do. And that's exactly what's happened again. They've voted to very significantly increase the Financial Stability Fund, which actually simply means that German taxpayers will be in further hock, and they're going to have to bail out southern European countries, in this case Greece, to start off with.
But doesn't that make a complete mockery of every single referendum on every single subject that has ever been placed?
You could put it that way, and it's interesting. In the UK, one of David Cameron's projects is that there are online where you can sign up and say, I can't remember, not polls, but where you can give your views on something, and apparently when it gets to 100,000 signatures, then the Cabinet Office will get involved. Well, I heard a couple of weeks ago that two of them did get to 100,000 signatures, and what did the Cabinet Office say? In other words, what did the Prime Minister's Office say? It said, it's not for us to comment.
Good grief. I mean, OK, really obvious thing to say, but hello, you were voted in by the people for the people. Why aren't you listening to the people?
Well, the senior politicians around Europe, they are all pro the European project, integration, closer harmony, and you can understand why, because many of them either lived through or heard directly from parents as to what happened pre-Second World War, during the war, and just post-war. And of course, Holocaust, devastation, couldn't have been worse in Europe. And actually, for 100 or 200 years, Europe, variously, has been at war. And they will say, look, the European project has brought greater harmony, great peace. Why do we want to break the thing up with the risk that we go back to what we experienced in the 18th, 19th and 20th centuries? Well, actually, I can understand what they're saying, but I think they're totally and utterly misguided. I think economics is what determines whether or not there's peace and security. When people feel secure, when they've got food in their mouth, when they're housed, when their kids are being educated, when there's good health service because there's money, then no one goes to war. It's only when the money runs out, because the politicians, and some of your listeners may be aware that I'm anti some things to do with banking, and the bankers take all the money, that's when you create disharmony.
Okay, I'm gonna. The result was very convincing in the Parliament offices. I mean, with 23 votes in favour and only 85 against and 3 abstentions. What does this actually mean for the euro crisis? If Germany is now standing up and saying, yes, we will back the problem, is it really going to have any effect on us here in Spain or with you in the UK, or is it just a mere drop in the ocean?
In the short term, it will mean that Greece, or more to the point, the lenders to Greece are bailed out, which are largely French and German banks. Mm-hmm. Spain, as I wrote recently, has $500 billion of loans to other European banks. So those banks will get some money paid back because of the Spanish debts. The Italians, who got the biggest amount of debt in EU, the lenders to Italy will get some money back. So in the short term, yes, it will help, no doubt. But didn't they say every time there was a bailout in 2010 and the early part of 2011 that's it, there won't be any more? And yet every time that it happens, the bailout fund, they call it this weird financial stability fund. I mean, talk about a con artist title.
Talk about, oh gosh.
Every time the financial stability fund gets bigger. Now let me remind you what this fund is. It is simply the government's signing off that today's and future's taxpayers will pay the money when it goes bust. So long term, all these things are doing is papering over the cracks. You cannot solve a debt problem by creating more debt. That should be patently obvious to everyone. And secondly, to use a medical metaphor, you cannot cure terminal illness by taking an aspirin.
No,
what you have to do is cut the cancer out. And what we have is a spreading of cancer. It's getting bigger and bigger. It started with households, then it went to companies, then it went to banks, then it went to governments, then it went to supra-governments, such as the European Central Bank, International Monetary Fund. But ultimately, do you know what? Germany's about the only country in the West that's got any money. It's the German taxpayers. The poor German taxpayers who are landed with the bills.
Absolutely. I mean, they're talking about securing the equivalent of 200 billion euros worth of loans.
Yes, 2,000 billion.
2,000 billion,
2
sorry.
trillion, in fact.
Yeah.
And the way they're going to do that is they've approved today that they're going to take the Financial Stability Fund up to 700-odd billion euros, and then what they're going to do, a bit like a mortgage, although it's already a mortgage, which is the weird thing about it, they're going to borrow 2 or 3 times that to take it up to $2 trillion. They're going to leverage the so-called assets, but again, the assets themselves are guarantees. They're effectively secured loans. So yes, 2,000 billion euros.
2,000 billion. I'm just trying to imagine the noughts.
Well, it's if I may say, it's all for naught. Little wealth manager's joke there. To put it in context, the size of the UK economy is less than 2 trillion euros. So in other words, it's bigger than the whole of our economy that taxpayers across Europe, largely Germany, is going to be in hock for. And it's all to secure the European project. But my point is, how can you secure anything when it's based on debt?
Absolutely.
You can't.
Let's talk about Angela Merkel. Now, obviously, she's been championing all this from the beginning. She's been the loudest voice. But this vote, according to the papers, has also highlighted tensions in the centre-right coalition that was strained by threats of dissent from many members, I'm just quoting from this article, who balked at the cost of propping up the Eurozone's strugglers, despite Germany being by far the most powerful nation economically, as you've said. Could she find herself being incredibly unpopular as a result of this and being kicked out at the next election?
Oh, her party is very unpopular.
Yeah, more so then, more so.
Germans, no question. And yes, in fact, throughout 2011, where they've had regional elections, her party has been hammered. But again, you got to give credit, if that's the right word, to politicians who at least have conviction. I just wish they had conviction on something that they were right upon rather than something that they're wholly wrong upon, because again, all it is kicking the can down the line until the inevitable when they cannot do it anymore.
Yeah. Okay, Jonathan, hold on just for a couple of minutes and we'll do a quick commercial break and then let's talk about Jeremy Paxman's show last night, because that has definitely got to get a mention. Hold on, please.
Tonight with Lisa Grant.
Yes, and we're in conversation with Jonathan Davis. Okay, so we've talked about Germany and them standing up and saying, we're going to back the Eurozone bailout. But let's move on to Jeremy Paxman. Now, this is a man who, quite honestly, has never ever been upstaged, outshone, stopped in his tracks in his entire career. But last night on Newsnight, it finally happened, didn't it?
You could say that. A distinguished and hugely experienced commentator, a chap called Peter Oborn, which some of your listeners will know, has just written a book which talks about, he calls it the guilty men, the people who 10 and 20 years ago were adamant that the United Kingdom needs to enter into the euro, and of course they patently got it wrong. But that wasn't the point. The point was that they drowned out any dissent. This Peter Oborn was on full flow. He was calling the chap from the EU, who was there live as well, an idiot, and he said it a number of times. He threw his book at Mr. Richard Lambert, the ex-editor of the Financial Times, who was the editor of the FT at the time when the debate was raging, and who literally would not allow anyone to comment in the FT about why they should not go into the euro. In other words, that was clamping down on free speech. And it was a remarkable a piece of TV theatre. Fortunately, I happened to see it last night, and I was actually getting undressed to go to bed, and I just stood and watched it with my mouth open.
Now,
I thought, this is fantastic.
Now, why is it worth talking about this happening? Why is this relevant to what we were speaking about before? I mean, these guys, I'm assuming, I have watched the footage themselves, and one of them, I'm sorry, I can't remember the gentleman's name, one of them was actually sitting there saying, it requires a lot more thought, or words to that effect, but he wouldn't be drawn on anything. I'm assuming that the name-calling that Peter did started when they just started being vague in their answers.
The chap you're referring to was, in fact, the EU representative,
right, yes.
the bureaucrat from Brussels.
Bureaucrat from Brussels, that was it.
Well, indeed, and the point is, these guys in Brussels, they're not elected. The Commission is not elected. They have a greasy pole that they have to slide up and slither up. But they've never actually been in the real world. They were politicians before, and then they're bumped up out into Brussels and made commissioners, and they pick their team. And these guys are lauded. They have fabulous pay and benefits. They have no idea what it's like in the real world. And when they come up with these plans about bailing out this, that, and the other, what actually it is the taxpayers to get hammered. It's not their money. They don't care. And when they talk about things like, we need to think about it more carefully, we need to discuss it more carefully. My goodness, someone said to me, why am I not going into politics? And I said, because I actually like to achieve things. Politicians and civil servants, their job, it's all about pushing paper and appearing to do things, but when is ever anything actually achieved?
It's true. It's absolutely true. Now, Peter was obviously very vocal, but I rather think from the footage that I saw, he was basically expressing what everybody has been thinking about for the last umpteen years, and he's just had the guts to go on television and say it.
Well, indeed, and I give him full power to his elbow for saying it as it is. The point, and I reiterate, the point is, in the 90s, when there was a raging debate about whether or not we should join the euro, anyone who talked against the euro was deemed a mad person, a bad person, and even though we were talking lucidly and evidently candidly and intelligently, our argument was dismissed as lunacy. And that's the point. You have to have a reasonable debate where both sides can have an opportunity to discuss the issues. But it didn't happen. But thank God that we had politicians at the time who were able to sway the leading politicians sufficiently that we didn't just go in at the first opportunity. I will say, however, it doesn't really matter when it comes down to whether or not the United Kingdom is in the euro, because our banks are effectively in the EU banking crisis.
Yes, absolutely.
Thus, we're as much at risk financially as Germany or France, because we have loaned vast amounts of money to, say, France and Germany and the Netherlands, and they in turn have loaned it to the likes of Greece and Italy and Portugal and Spain. So, whether we're in the euro or not, however, had we been in the euro, we would now no longer be in control of our own finances.
Absolutely.
At least we have some control.
Yeah. Funnily enough, I looked up today quotes from Jeremy Paxman, because obviously he's been asked an awful lot about, how do you feel about what happened last night? And he's had a general no comment, which from Jeremy Paxman is just completely, completely unheard of.
Well, I think Paxman has a lot to answer for here, not just specifically about last night, but he and his colleagues just haven't got it for years. They haven't got the mess that we're in. And, if you watch Newsnight the last few weeks, maybe the last couple of months, yes, they've been ramping it up. They're talking about fear. They're talking about disaster and all that. But, this disaster has been building for years. And I actually said to Paxman myself about, 4 or 5 years ago to his face, you do realise, Jeremy, that the economics guys on your show don't know their left from their right. And he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, because as far as he was concerned, they had the top economists in the British media, and actually they kept missing the point. They kept saying there's not a problem. Well, look at it over the last few years. Look how we have been building the biggest economic problem on earth.
On that note, thank you very much, Jonathan. As ever, always a pleasure to talk to you. If you do ever end up on Newsnight yourself, you will let us know, won't you?
Well, I will do, but somehow I suspect that's one place I will not be invited.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as I know, Jeremy's pretty good at holding a grudge.
Well, you might be right. You might be right.
All right, go back and enjoy the evening sunshine over there in the UK.
Yes,
and,
I will do. It's a beautiful sunset.
And we'll
talk to you again.
We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Bye.